one of the most common questions I get asked from business owners is, when's the right time to sell my business? Well, as you can imagine, there's a lot of factors that go into that, but I'd kind of like to start this conversation with, when is the wrong time to sell your business? And, I've had a saying for years. Some people stay a little too long at the punch bowl. Their business is going great. They're making good money. Like, well, why should I sell now? This business has never been better. Well, you're here a little later. Maybe that is actually a good time. But when is the wrong time to sell the business? For sure, if you get sick and can't perform. By the way, potential buyers aren't the only ones that know that. Your employees know that. Your customers and significant relationships know that. It's just a bad time to get out of the business. What's worse, though? If you're dead and you can't even represent yourself, and it's the family that's doing the selling for you. Because when you're not there anymore, you may have issues with key employee retention, with customer retention, just a whole bunch of things that it's not a good time to go. Another bad time to sell your business is if you just lost a key employee. Let's say you've had that really loyal person for 10, 20, 30 years who your customers have grown to love and enjoy working with, and they've just walked out the door. Not a good time to sell. Another one is if you're in financial distress. Maybe you were shut off by a vendor, or your bank lines got pulled or canceled, or just some other signs of distress. Maybe even it's not your fault. It could be the economy or your industry is going to hell in a handbasket. Again, that's not a good time to sell, because who wants to buy a sinking ship? Another bad time if you're in a lawsuit. So if you envision any things coming down the turnpike, you better deal with them proactively, make sure you're properly insured, and that they're not going to be kind of deal killers for the business. Okay, so enough doom and gloom, all right? Let's get to now when might be a good time to sell your business. Let me start with some qualitative factors, okay? The qualitative factors are things like your personal financial position, your kind of place in life. Where are you with your life success plan? Are you really thrilled with your 168 hours a week, or do you have a really long list of stuff that you still want to get to? Whether it's more time with the grandkids, a few more trips here and there, maybe you want to go see every major league ballpark or go to the Final Four. I don't know what it is for you, but go deep with you, the personal you, and your significant other and anyone else that's important to you about how you really want to spend that 168 hours a week. Because if you think about it in your work years, let's say you're working, well, I don't know any business owners that work 40 hours. It's more like 40, 50, 60, 70, right? So do the math, man. You do that, you sleep, you bathe, you eat, you commute. My gosh, you're up to like 150 hours before you know it. That leaves 18 hours of leisure time. So, again, really focus in on the qualitative factors. Now, beyond the qualitative factors, there are a bunch of quantitative factors that I want you to consider as well. So a right time to sell the business is, let's say, 2 to 3 years after you started planning for that sale. So I'm sorry to go back to another wrong time to sell it. The wrong time to sell it is tomorrow, unless you've been planning for 3 years on what you're going to do. And the reason you need to plan for 3 years, unless you've been through a sale before, buyers and their advisors have due diligence questionnaires and lots of things they're going to ask you about your business that you may not have thought about. And many of these questions are going to go back 3 years, maybe 4 years or 5 years, depending upon the type of business that you're in. So it takes some planning. And in that planning stage, you're going to get your books and records together. You're going to get your customer, relationships and documentation down. You're going to get your key employees kind of in a good place. And what I mean by in a good place, you want them to be really fired up about their jobs. You want them to have some sort of employment contracts, maybe with some sort of non-compete within the tight constraints of the laws around non-compete agreements. And you want them to have a piece of your future success. Yeah, I mean, you might actually share some of the sale proceeds with people in the forms of dollars above an excess value, or stay on bonuses, or things to incent them for them to be psyched about your transition out as the business owner. Another time is, well, Let's say if you want to stay or you want to go immediately, right? Those are two different things. Some people want to sell and walk out the door as soon as possible, and others want to sell and wait for 2 or 3 years because you feel like the transition's going to take that long, or you're on the precipice of, some abnormal growth, some really awesome growth, and you know that you just don't have the resources to fund that growth, and that another company might just be better suited to take it to the next level. Good example of that is, let's say you have some intellectual property or a product or a tool that you need to sell to, a couple of the major companies out there, but it's going to be impossible to break through their purchasing process when they've got a list of vendors that's quite long already. Well, you might be best to sell and stay for a few years in that case, to allow your skill and knowledge of the product to infiltrate through the sales force of your acquirer so that you can reach those vendors. In that case, you also may not sell 100% of the business. You may just sell a small percentage of it and have a retained interest. What I've seen in my experience, folks that sell a portion of their business and keep a small retained interest to a seller that they really believe in their heart of hearts can grow the business like they were unable to do, get as much in that second tranche of sale as they got in the first tranche. Even though in round one, they sold 80%, that second piece of 20% many times can be as much or even more than what that first piece turned out to be. Another time to sell the business is when your business gets to the point where it can run without you. Yeah, where you don't even have to be there and the day-to-day runs smooth like it never, did before. And why is that important? Well, think about it this way. Who wants to buy a business where it was run by the chief cook and bottle washer, aka you, who when you're out the door, everyone's, wondering who's on first and where are we going from here? That's not good. So you need to get that business to a point where it can run well without you. That's a great time to think about a sale. Another time is when you've had 3 good years of financial records. One great year is not going to make for a big sale for you. You need to have 3 good years in a row. And if you can even string together more than 3 good years in a row, well, that's even better. How about your personal financial side? Forget about the 168 hours for the time being. But when you know what you want to do with that 168 hours, now someone like a good financial planner can quantify what it's going to cost to do that and how much you're going to need to have to get that done. So make sure that you're either financially independent before the sale, or that the sale in and of itself, without contingencies, without holdbacks, just a flat out cash on the barrelhead after tax, is going to be enough to get you to a state of financial independence. Now, I'm not saying you want to go buy 10 Rolls Royces, but maybe you do. But make sure that your definition of financial independence really suits you and your partner in terms of what you want to do with your 168 hours and how you want to play out the rest of your life. That's really important. So, in a perfect world, you'd be financially independent before you sell the business. And the sale of the business could just be the gravy or the icing on the cake, as they say. But defining financial independence goes back to your 168-hour view. What are the things that you really want to do in life? And then some quantification. What's that going to cost? And how much do you need to have in a bucket in order to pay for that, plus life's contingencies and the ordinary stuff that you want to continue to do and the lifestyle that you choose to maintain? I'd be willing to say okay to selling the business if the sale of the business itself made you financial independent. Financially independent after the sale of business means you've factored in taxes, all the taxes you'll have to pay from a sale. You've got cash on the barrelhead, and whatever's left in the form of a contingency or a retainer or a holdover or a holdback isn't going to impair your future financial independence. In other words, you don't want to be dependent on that company's performance in order to reach your view of financial independence. Because if that's the case, why sell at all, right? You might as well hang in there for another year or two. And then the last is, what makes most sense to you? Your time frame, your terms, your culture, your employees, your legacy. What's really important to you about this business? Now, if it's something silly like, well, I want to make sure my name stays on the door, get over it, man. I mean, while that may be important to you, I'm not sure that's really important to the rest of the world, to the buyer, to your employees, or to your stakeholders, your family in particular. So understand what really makes sense to you, which brings me right back to square one, and that is your personal life plan. What is it that you really want to do with your 168 hours a week? Figure that out, and then we'll put some pencil to paper and figure out when is exactly the right time for you to think about selling your business.